What is really driving the conflict? Is the conflict centered around issues pertaining to typical organizational business, or is it something more personal? Conflicts generally fall into two categories: issue-based conflicts and interpersonal conflicts. Or, to put it another way, is it personal or is it simply business? Issue-based conflicts pertain to typical organizational matters: scheduling, compensation, job assignments, what people are normally expected to do as part of their jobs. These are issues that can be worked through generally with honest conversation, negotiation, and compromise. Then there are more person-based conflicts. These are more difficult to resolve. Interpersonal disagreements, personality differences, one person gets on another's nerves, people who just don't mesh well together. Distinguishing between the two is crucial, but that doesn't mean it's easy to tell the difference. For example, what appears on the surface to be an issue-based conflict may actually be more personal. If one person has a personal problem with another, they can, either consciously or unconsciously, try to mask it by finding an organizational issue to latch onto. And this can be challenging to work through. But it's still valuable to make the best attempt possible to differentiate between the two. Because if we end up mistakenly conflating them, we'll likely take the wrong approach to dealing with the conflict. If we approach an interpersonal conflict as one based on an issue, we're not going to resolve it because no matter what decision is made on that issue, the interpersonal one is still festering. And vice versa. If we approach a conflict over an issue as if it's an interpersonal one, it's not going to go well either. Now, we have a tendency when we get into a conflict with someone to point the finger at them. There's something wrong with them. They're lazy. They're incompetent. They don't care. And this certainly could be true, and in many cases is. The person you're working with could just be a lazy, incompetent, uncaring schmuck. But instead of gradually coming to this conclusion over time after all other reasonable possibilities are ruled out, too often we go there right away, or way too early at any rate, and assume the other person has some kind of personality defect and the problem lies solely with them. Often, though, this isn't the case, or at the very least, it's not that simple. There are likely other things driving their behavior and driving your behavior. So we should first try to figure out what is really driving the conflict. Because if we just write the other person off right away and blame it all on them, it absolves us of any responsibility for managing the conflict in a constructive way. There may be something that we can change about our own behavior or about our approach to the situation that could make a substantial improvement. Control and change what you can, to paraphrase the old saying. Then, if the situation doesn't improve, maybe the problem does lie with the other person. Then you can proceed from that point. So even though the conflict may stem from personal faults that lie with the other person, there's a good chance it doesn't. Instead, person-focused conflicts are often due to differing perspectives, expectations, and assumptions that stem from different backgrounds and experiences, how different people see the world, and their place in it. People of different cultures, generations, nationalities, genders, races, all have different lenses through which they view the world. Our past experiences, positive and negative, leave a huge mark on how we react and interpret what happens to us today, whether we realize it at the time or not. To illustrate what I mean with an example, let's look at the contrast between how two different generations approach their work. Millennials, my generation, and baby boomers. No disrespect to all you Gen Xers and Gen Zers out there, and to our elders from the greatest or silent generations. This distinction is just simpler for me to make. And I'm referring to general trends here, of course, that are often pointed to that distinguish millennials from previous generations. Millennials have been shaped by a fundamentally different world, a world constantly connected and global, with rapid technological advances. A post-9/11 world with the constant threat of terrorism as a given fact of life. A post-recession economy that severely dampened their job prospects just when entering the workforce, which was further compounded by the coronavirus pandemic just a decade later. Massive, unprecedented levels of student loan debt, the looming threat of climate change, and the prospect of not living as long or being as well off as their parents' generation. Just to name a few. While boomers may have been more content with staying at the same organization, following orders as given, and more accepting of a hierarchical and even paramilitaristic, in the case of police and corrections, command and control and bureaucracy and those sorts of things, millennials tend to want to be more involved in decision-making processes, to be recognized for achievements instead of their manager taking all the credit, and working toward a cause or adhering to values they care about as opposed to simply remaining loyal to an organization, and placing a greater value on work-life balance, so far as that is even achievable. If managers don't take these generational differences into account, they may not understand where the new generation of their workforce is coming from or how to relate to them. They may perceive any conflicts they have with them as being driven by them as people and find faults in their personalities when really it comes down to differences in backgrounds, perspectives, and priorities. And this same dynamic applies to how conflict can manifest in many other contexts as well. So that's all for now. Do you see the value of distinguishing between issue-based and interpersonal conflicts? Have you faced a conflict that you may have thought was personal but later found out was something else? Or vice versa? Have you approached a conflict you thought was about a work-related issue, only to then later find out it was really due to a problem they had with you as a person? Or maybe you figured out later it was actually you who had some kind of personal problem with them? Comment below and let me know. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching, see you next time, and have a good one.